If Iran violates the terms of the New Deal, the US will immediately start a new wave of bombings. This is the statement made today by the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, after he announced that the negotiators have finally agreed to sign at least a memorandum of understanding to end the war. And after this statement, oil prices immediately started to fall since early morning. Trump shocked everyone with a statement that the US is abruptly halting its new military operation in the Hormuz Strait due to alleged progress in negotiations with Iran on an agreement to end the war. The point is that the operation to escort ships through the Hormuz Strait, which began on Monday, eventually led to a shootout between the US and Iran. It was their first missile strike by Iran on the United Arab Emirates since the ceasefire was announced a month ago, and the merchant ships still weren't able to pass through the strait. At the same time, the White House believes it is close to reaching an agreement with Iran on a one-page memorandum of understanding that would end the war and lay the groundwork for more detailed nuclear negotiations. But here's the first inconsistency. The United States of America, although they claim that they have almost reached an agreement with Iran, have only sent their proposal to Iran and given them 48 hours to respond. But there is still no answer. And the head of Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Abbas Araghchi, has already hinted that the US proposal doesn't work for them. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, please subscribe to this channel, like it, and leave a comment. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video, or by using the QR code on your screens, or through sponsorship on the YouTube platform. In general, if you find this episode interesting and useful, at the end of the episode I will ask you to support the work of our YouTube channel with your donations. So, early Wednesday morning, Donald Trump unexpectedly announced that he was suspending the new US military operation in the Hormuz Strait due to progress in negotiations with Iran on a ceasefire agreement. Or, to be precise, not just a ceasefire, but ending the war. Trump said, quote, "Based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, and also considering significant progress in reaching a full and final agreement with representatives of Iran, we have reached mutual agreement that, although the blockade will remain in place, Project Freedom will be suspended for a short period of time to see if it is possible to end the war and sign an agreement." But here's the strange part. How could Project Freedom interfere with the signing of a peace agreement? After all, these aren't even attacks on Iran, and if we believe Donald Trump himself, the idea was that US warships would simply escort merchant ships and tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, if necessary, protecting them from strikes by Iran. That's why it's very strange when Trump says that we're the ones suspending, not Iran. But considering how often Trump has claimed that Iran is about to, any moment now, almost capitulate, there isn't much reason to trust his words. The operation to escort ships through the Hormuz Strait, called Project Freedom, which began on Monday, eventually led to a shootout between the US and Iran, and to the first since the announcement of the ceasefire. Iran launched the first missile strike on the United Arab Emirates since the ceasefire was announced a month ago, although later the command of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stated that it wasn't them. Trump's idea was that US warships would cover commercial vessels and thus escort them out of the Persian Gulf. But Iran quickly said it would not allow this. As a result, on the very first day of Trump's operation, Iran fired missiles toward an American warship, and later it began to launch massive missile attacks on the United Arab Emirates. Ship owners still did not dare to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, despite Trump's assurances that the American military would definitely protect them. And in almost 72 hours of this operation, the US managed to get just 2 ships through the strait, and 3 more ships were attacked by the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's the whole operation, and it's over. Or rather, Trump announced that he was asked to suspend this operation. And right after that, sources from Axios reported that the White House believes it is close to an agreement with Iran on a one-page memorandum of understanding which will end the war and lay some groundwork for more detailed nuclear negotiations. A bit later, in particular, Trump conveyed his new peace proposal to the Iranians. And now the United States of America is expecting a response from Iran on several key points within the next 48 hours. For these 48 hours, Trump announced a suspension of his military operation in the Hormuz Strait, and importantly, nothing has been agreed upon yet. But sources have reported that this is the closest moment to an agreement since the beginning of the war. Among other provisions, the deal includes Iran's commitment to impose a moratorium on uranium enrichment. The U.S. has agreed to lift sanctions and unblock billions of dollars in frozen Iranian assets, and also the removal of restrictions by both sides on transit through the Hormuz Strait. And in this version, as you can see, there are more and more concessions from the United States of America, no matter how much Trump insists that Iran has practically already surrendered. Besides, it's rather strange that Donald Trump is announcing that they're getting close to some kind of deal. After all, the White House had just stated that it believes the Iranian leadership is divided and that reaching a consensus between the different factions could be very, very difficult. Some American officials remain skeptical even about the possibility of reaching an initial agreement. Moreover, just a day ago, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth stated directly that it is militants from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps who are attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz, who absolutely do not obey the politicians with whom the U.S. is negotiating. And that's exactly why supposedly it's impossible to say that the truce or ceasefire was broken. He says, no, we agreed to a truce with the politicians, with the officials, but it's the military who are attacking, and supposedly they're not really in contact with each other. That's why Trump says we're close to a deal, but with whom? And it's important to remember that Trump and his team have repeatedly expressed optimism about the possibility of reaching a deal during previous rounds of negotiations and during the current war, but so far they haven't reached any agreement. But even if the United States of America and Iran reach an agreement now, it won't be a nuclear deal, and it won't be an agreement to end the war. It's very important to understand the definition here. It will just be a memorandum of understanding. That's where the parties say, we agree that the war needs to end, and here are roughly the terms on which we'll end it, and we really promise to continue good faith negotiations. This suggests that the White House has kind of lowered its expectations and is already willing to settle for at least something. And you know, I am often criticized for allegedly downplaying things. That is, for downplaying the achievements of the American President Donald Trump in this war and allegedly siding with the Iranian side. There are commentators who write, Peachy, you don't understand, this is the most brilliant idea of the American President Donald Trump, and you just keep criticizing him all the time. But let me remind you that Donald Trump started this war by stating that Iran must capitulate, period, and accept all the conditions of the United States of America, and that he would not make the mistakes that Barack Hussein Obama once made during the signing of the agreement with Iran in 2015. And now, as they say, watch closely. It is known that right now, Donald Trump's team and Iranian officials are not discussing a peace agreement, not an agreement to end the war, and certainly not a nuclear agreement, only a one-page document. A memorandum of understanding consisting of 14 points. In its current form, the Memorandum of Understanding provides for an end to the war in the region and the start of a 30-day period of negotiations for a detailed agreement. The opening of the Hormuz Strait, which in fact was already open before the war, on limiting Iran's nuclear program, not lifting the restrictions, and lifting U.S. sanctions. But after all, Trump, let me remind you, insisted that by lifting sanctions from Iran, Barack Hussein Obama made a huge mistake, and he definitely wouldn't do that. Let's move on. This memorandum states that Iran's restrictions on shipping through the Hormuz Strait and the U.S. naval blockade will be gradually lifted during this 30-day period. And as Donald Trump stated, if the negotiations fail, American troops will be able to restore this blockade, or resume military actions. Here is what Donald Trump said today. Quote, if Iran agrees to fulfill the agreements already reached, which may be a big assumption, then the already legendary Operation Epic Fury will end, and the effective blockade will allow the Hormuz Strait to be opened for everyone, including Iran. If they do not agree, the bombings will begin, and unfortunately, they will be significantly more powerful and more intense than before. But friends, haven't we heard similar statements from Donald Trump during earlier phases of this war? And how should we understand Donald Trump's words when he says, if they agree, then the legendary Operation Epic Fury will end? After all, yesterday on May 5, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the legendary Operation Epic Fury has already ended. So who should we trust, the President or the Secretary of State? Although the President also said the day before that the war was already over. That was on May 1. And now I'll remind you of a very interesting chronology, because with this barrage of statements from Donald Trump, a lot gets lost. On March 21, 2026, Donald Trump stated, and I quote, "If Iran does not fully open the Hormuz Strait, abandoning threats within 48 hours from this moment, the United States of America will strike and destroy their various power plants, starting with the largest one." That was on March 21, but then 48 hours pass, and what does Trump do? Of course, he bombs Iran. No. Trump says, just like today, that supposedly someone asked him. Today he says, Pakistan asked me and other countries. Back then, someone also asked him. And so, what does he do? He extends his tough deadline by 5 days. On March 23, Donald Trump states, and I quote, "I am pleased to announce that the United States of America and Iran have held very good and productive talks over the past 2 days regarding a complete and comprehensive settlement of our military actions in the Middle East. I have instructed the Department of Defense to postpone any military strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for 5 days. After 5 days, well, probably Trump started attacking. No, Trump announced that once again he was very close to a deal with Iran and once again extended his deadline by another 10 days. And once again he threatened that if this time Iran doesn't capitulate, well, then he would definitely bomb that country. After those 10 days, Trump once again threatened to bomb Iran and insisted that Iran was about to capitulate. In the end, those 10 days also passed. Then there were another 2 days, and finally, on April 7, Trump agreed to a 2-week truce. I emphasize, a 2-week truce. And he says if there is no agreement within these 2 weeks, well, then I will definitely bomb Iran. 2 weeks passed, and Trump threatened again and once more unilaterally extended the truce. And in the end, he said, listen, the truce is now indefinite. Well, just forget about this truce already. And on May 1st, without reaching any agreement with Iran, without reopening the Strait of Hormuz, without achieving anything, Donald Trump announces that the U.S. military operation against Iran is over. And now the question, was even one of Donald Trump's threats actually carried out? No. Will Iran listen to Donald Trump this time and tremble at his threats? No, of course not. But that's not all. Donald Trump assured everyone that he would put an end to Iran's nuclear program once and for all, unlike his predecessors. But right now, the parties are actively discussing the duration of the uranium enrichment moratorium for at least 12 years. So, the question is, how is this deal different from the agreement under Barack Hussein Obama, whom Donald Trump criticizes so loudly? However, in the Memorandum of Understanding, Iran commits to never seeking to possess nuclear weapons and not engaging in activities related to their creation. But I emphasize, the Memorandum of Understanding has no legal force. But this is what the US is offering. In addition, under the Memorandum of Understanding, the United States undertakes to gradually lift the sanctions imposed on Iran and to gradually release billions of dollars in Iranian funds frozen around the world. Let me remind you how loudly Donald Trump criticized the Obama administration when they unblocked several $100 million for Iran. He said, "What are you doing? How can you do that? Now they are doing it themselves." And here is the key question. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced today while in Beijing that Iran will only agree to a fair and comprehensive agreement in negotiations with the United States to end the war in the Middle East. Here is the quote, "We will do everything possible to protect our legitimate rights and interests in the negotiations. We will only agree to a fair and comprehensive agreement." But, importantly, at the same time, Abbas Araghchi did not give a direct answer to Trump's proposal to suspend the US operation to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which had previously been presented as an incentive to reach an agreement between the parties. Moreover, Iran has not even responded yet to Trump's proposal, which is already filled with concessions from the United States of America. Well, let's see what happens in 48 hours. Of course, there's a possibility that in 48 hours Trump will grant another 48 hours. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid channel membership using the links and details in the description of this video or by scanning the QR code on your screen. I would appreciate any support from you. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.